You're hearing somebody who was putting needles in his arms 13 times a day. There was nothing I wouldn't do. I stole from everyone, stole from my parents, broke into my parents' house on Christmas Eve while they were out of town and burned half their kitchen down cooking meth. And there's no one I wouldn't hurt and no sin I wouldn't commit to stay high when I was an addict. And so I walk out with the shopping cart full of supplies to be homeless with. And so wife and dog, tag along with me. I push the cart across the street. We push it all the way up the hill into the woods. At the entry of the woods, I took the machete out and started clearing a trail. Got off in the woods deep enough where I felt secure, started clearing an area out. We laid the tarp down, set up a tent, and started drinking beer and ran out of meth. And so we figured we better start drinking because, we're going to be coming down pretty hard, so I wasn't even concerned that I was going to prison, dude. I knew I was ready, dude. And so I had already been saved for 10 years. I just couldn't get clean, man. I could not get clean, dude.
Have you ever been on a losing streak? Everything you do seems to fail. Does it feel like something is working against you? And no matter how hard you try, you're destined to lose. Maybe you've attended the school of hard knocks, and you're okay with that, if only you could pass the class. Sometimes life throws me a few curveballs, and sometimes I sabotage my own ship. But is there a point of no return? Is it my fate to always live this way? To fail miserably, time and time again. Is there a lifeline, a second, third, and possibly fourth chance? Or do I finally just need to throw in the towel? Is there hope for my future, or am I simply a born loser? My guest today will answer that question as he shares the second half of his amazing life change story. If you haven't listened to the last episode, I want to encourage you to do so. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. Previously on the last episode.
When I was a kid, and my parents still, my last name used to be spelled like loser, Loser. And so Eric, school was horrible, man. So I was introduced to meth at 15. It was, for me, meth was like meth. There was meth and then all other drugs, man. So once I started doing meth, it was over with for me, man. It was downhill quick after that. And so finally he's like, do you want to be free? Right. And he's yelling at me and I'm like, yes.
Wow. What a story. And that's amazing. So it sounded like the salvation moment or the come to Jesus moment was legit, that really happened and that you felt that way. So it reminds me, and I can't remember where it's found in the Bible, but it reminds me of the story of the man who got rid of the demon in his life, and he cleans up his life, and the demon leaves his life and goes wandering, throughout the earth or whatever, decides to come back and check on the guy or the man and finds that the man didn't replace the empty space with anything. And so the demon goes out and gets 7 more demons, and they come into the man's life. So the man had 1 demon. Now he's got 8, and his life is even worse than it was before. And so it just reminds me of that. You're telling me that story. It sounds to me like you had this moment, but you didn't replace it. You didn't replace the emptiness with anything and kind of went back. Would that be an accurate description? And now the rest of Cory's story.
Man, Eric, I don't think you could have said it any better. And yes, 100%, you clean your house, which is yourself, man. And you get that gone, you get all those demons gone. And when they come back and check on you, like you said, they bring 7 demons stronger than themselves and come back in with you. And it's almost as if, the enemy that we have, right? There's an enemy. And if you don't think there's an enemy, try to stop whatever it is that you said you were going to stop doing, right? If you don't think there's an enemy, stop sinning completely. Go ahead, because it can't be done. There's an enemy. Now so when he brings those 7 demons back stronger than he is, it's almost like they're saying, okay, I wasn't strong enough. Here's 7 stronger ones. Let's see you get out of this. Right. And it was worse. It was worse, Eric. The next 10 years were even worse. So I want to just touch on real quick the depth of the pit that I was in, and just how addicted I actually was. Just in case there's somebody out there that's thinking to themselves, yeah, I was way worse off than that. I did this, or I was over here and I can't be helped. There's no hope for me because I'm this bad, right? So let me throw this out there. So you're talking about, yeah, you're hearing somebody who was putting needles in his arms 13 times a day. You're talking about somebody who, dude, I wanted to quit so bad. Every day I wanted to quit. Every time I got high, I wanted to quit. I would throw my needles in a ditch somewhere, not have any needles the next day, come back and get them and use them again. I would find random needles on the ground, Eric, and with dried blood in them, and use them, not knowing whose blood it was, and still using the needle. I knew someone who had officially been diagnosed with AIDS, officially, and no one wanted to share a needle with him. And I still shared a needle with him, knowing and taking the chance that I was going to get AIDS, which I didn't, thank God, grace of God. But I shared a needle with him multiple times because that's how bad of an addict I was. There was nothing I wouldn't do. I stole from everyone, stole from my parents, broke into my parents' house on Christmas Eve while they were out of town, and burned half their kitchen down cooking meth. There is nothing that I wouldn't do to stay high, and there's no one I wouldn't hurt, and no sin I wouldn't commit to stay high when I was an addict. And so, somewhere along the way, I met a girl who we also very quickly hit it off, and we were doing, it started with meth, from the get go. That's how I met her, and so we were both deep off in addiction, and we ended up getting married. And so so I loved her, and I know she loved me, man. And it was, there would be little couple weeks at a time sometimes where we'd be clean, and dude, those times, were great, man. We connected well. And it was just a good deal for a week or two at a time, man. But unfortunately, we were both hardcore meth addicts, shooting meth, all the time. And so the relationship was toxic for both of us, really from day one, man. And so it was, some of the worst things I've been through were probably, I went through with her also, one time in particular when we were homeless, we were staying in a motel for probably about a month's time frame. And it was one of the instances where I just ran out of resources, man. I couldn't get any more meth. I couldn't get any more money. And I ran out of resources, and we got ourselves into a situation where we just didn't have any help, man. No choice at all. And so I remember from that motel, there was a couple there that had some kennels with some little dogs in them. And they would not take them outside because you weren't allowed to have pets at this motel. And so the day that we were supposed to get kicked out of that motel, ran out of drugs and money, I told that couple that had those dogs, I said, look, man, why don't you let me take this dog? I'm going to take this dog. And so I don't think I really asked. I'm pretty sure I just said, I'm going to take this dog. You don't ever take him outside. Let me take the dog. So I took this dog who became named Jack the Ripper, a little rat terrier, and we named him Jack the Ripper. But so me, my ex-wife, and Jack the Ripper walked out of the hotel with nothing to our motel, without anything to our names, and we walked down to the Walmart a few blocks away that was across from some woods. Her and the dog stayed outside while I walked in with an empty shopping cart and started pulling things off the shelves. Things like tents, canned meat, vegetables in cans, all kinds of non-perishable food, a machete, a tent heater that ran on propane, some tarps, some plastic crates, a couple cases of beer, and filled the cart up all the way. Put my cell phone, which had no minutes even turned on back when you had to have minutes on your phone, So I had a phone with no minutes on it, and I put it up to my ear, and I started acting like I was cussing somebody out on the other side of the line, man. I was, F you, you owe me money, blah blah blah, give me my money, right? I'm talking to no one, but I'm yelling and cussing, and everyone around me thinks I'm belligerent. Well, no, I'm belligerent, but I'm belligerent, and they're scared to stop me. So I pushed this cart right out the store, right by the people checking receipts. They didn't even think about, stopping me, right? Because I'm so irate. And so I walk out with the shopping cart full of supplies to be homeless with. And so wife and dog, tag along with me. I push the cart across the street. We push it all the way up the hill into the woods. To be at the entry of the woods, I took the machete out and started clearing a trail. Got off in the woods deep enough where I felt secure. Started clearing an area out. We laid the tarp down, set up a tent, and started drinking beer and ran out of meth. And so we figured we better start drinking because, we're going to be coming down pretty hard, so we start drinking and, time goes by, dude. We, every day or so, I would go and steal some more beer, walk in the same store, do the same thing over and over, dude. You walk in, walk back out with a shopping cart full of beer and push it across the street. And so anyway, man, we're living in the woods. It's wintertime. It starts snowing, man. It gets cold. And so the tent heater on that little propane, the little propane container would last about 4 or 5 hours and heat us up. The little dog, me, her, and the little dog would be wrapped in these thick sleeping bags we also stole. And that tent heater would keep us warm for a few hours. But then when it ran out, we would wake up freezing, dude. It would be freezing cold. And, like I said, it was one of the only years in Texas where it snowed quite a bit for a short time frame. And so worst time of the year to be homeless, man. And so weeks go by. And at some point, I had obtained a bike. I probably stole a bicycle. And I started in that scenario. I had been clean for meth for a few weeks, but we're just drinking every day now, right? But I had to do something, man. I didn't know what to do. So I had to get a job. I knew I had to get some money somehow. Nobody was trying to hand me any money, that's for sure. And so I got on this bike. Started waking up early in the morning, and there was a Brahms right there. And I would go to this Brahms. It was the only thing open at like 5 or 6 in the morning. I'd go in the bathroom. I had a backpack with some toiletries and stuff. And I would go in and I would shave and clean up the best that I could. Right. And I mean, I only had 1 or 2 pairs of clothes. So I'm sure I smelled, right. I mean, I was homeless, dude. And so, but I would clean up the best I could and ride that bike around to every spot right there, man, that I could go to. But it was so hard. Like, people don't think about, they're like, oh, why these homeless people don't get a job? Why don't you just go get a job? Well, number one, I mean, you might not think about this, but I didn't have a phone. So number one, I look like walking death. And so that alone prevents me from getting a job at most places. But then on the chance that I get to talk to a manager and the manager has pity on me and wants to hire me, how's he going to even call me? Right? Like, how does someone even call you about an application if you don't have a phone turned on? So I had to get a job and I had to get hired on the spot, because otherwise they wouldn't even be able to call me, dude. So I went place to place to place. And then finally, one of the little dollar stores hired me at $6.75 an hour for 2 hours a day, 3 days a week. So you're talking about a combined total of 6 hours a week. And I took it. And so my first day at work, I get up, I ride the bike from the tent, from the woods to the dollar store, and I go in, I work, and there's a manager there that wasn't normally at that store. And so that manager, we got to talking, and he found out about my situation, being homeless in the woods with my wife and my dog. And he gave me this card with this girl's name on it. And he said, listen, I want you to call this girl immediately when you get off of work and just tell her your situation. And so, I did. So I got off work and we went to a payphone and we called this girl, and she said, listen, I want you to go back to your tent. And I want you to get all your stuff, as much as you can, get it all picked up and bring it out to here. Tell me how to get to the woods. And she showed up, not knowing who we were. She showed up in her Corvette, and we could barely fit anything in the car, dude. So we had to she picked us up and whatever she could fit in the car, which you can imagine isn't much. And she picked us up and took us back to her house. She lived on Eagle Mountain Lake, man, in a house. And she took us back there, made like 5 trips back and forth to the woods to get our stuff, and took it all to her house, let us stay there the night, and ordered a bunch of pizza and got us fed and showered up for the first time in a long time, right? And so that next morning, she took us a few blocks away to introduce us to a guy who took us to his house and his little land where he had some trailers set up that he was leasing out and a duplex that he was leasing out. And so took us over there, and he asked me, we introduced me to him, and he asked me, he immediately shook my hand. He said, how much money you got in your pocket? and I had $40, man. And I said, I've got $40 in my pocket, man. And he said, let me have it. And so I gave it to him, and he turned around and he pointed back there and he said, where do you want to stay? Which, you want to stay in a trailer, the duplex, whatever, already had electricity, all ready to go, ready-made place to stay, and so we're like, the duplex, so, anyway, man, so we moved into that duplex that day, for $40 down. And so, so here's the thing, man. So we move in, move our stuff in, and I've got this job at the Dollar Tree, but the Dollar Tree was 10 miles away, dude. And all I had was a bike. Right. So I made it, dude. I started going to work the next morning. I would ride that bike up and down these hills too, man. Of all the roads it was, man, it was like up and downhill, over and over, up and down a hill. And so I ride to work, 10 miles on a bike to get there to work 2 hours. Right. And then ride back. And so you can imagine that's not going to last very long, bro. It wasn't worth it. I couldn't do it, man. Number one, it was just too much. And so that lasted for a few weeks. I think I did manage to make it happen a few weeks. But after that, I quit the job. Right. And so, of course, I have some money, just enough to get a little bit of enough meth to start selling. And I started selling meth from the duplex, man. And the cycle started all over again, dude. So
this was your marriage with your,
that was my
with your first wife.
So we were together, and and it's a blur, dude, but it was like 3 or 4 years. It was a decent, significant amount of time, man. And to when you start to talk about meth addiction and being addicted to meth, everything we did was it was whack, man. So it was a crazy lifestyle, up and down, chaos, in and out of homelessness. You're always moving somewhere else, dude. It was nuts, man. For the whole time we were married, it was nuts, man. And we were both highly addicted to meth, man. And it was the worst of the worst, man.
Well, why don't you lead me to the events where you got caught with meth? So what happened that day or night that you got caught, and tell me what happened after that.
I wanted to say this because I said that it was miserable doing dope for the next 10 years. And this is year 10 now of those next 10 years of misery, right? I was tired, Eric. I was tired, worn out. And even though I had enough dope to kind of survive and all of that, man, dude, I was tired and I didn't want to be doing it anymore. I was disappointed in God. I hated myself for it, and I wanted to be done. And so I also knew that at some point, since I was already on a blue warrant for probation from running from my first charge of meth, I knew that the next time I got caught with meth, I was going to prison. I knew that. So 18 year had happened. I had gotten caught with meth for the first time, slapped on the hand, probation, got back out, got a blue warrant, ran from that, and continued on until year 20. And so on year 20, I had gotten relaxed. I was doing pretty well as far as I don't know what happened or how this happened, but I was doing a lot better than I had in the past with keeping enough dope to survive. I was getting a little bit larger quantities, and I was able to sustain and have a place to stay just by having dope and keep supporting my habit and have food and that kind of thing. So in my mind, I was being a successful dope dealer, right? Because even though I wasn't getting anywhere, I was maintaining. And so that was my thought process back then. But I had just picked up, and I was making a route back to where I lived. And so I had dropped off quite a bit already. And at that time, one of the things I quit doing is driving my own car. I would have someone who was legal drive a legal car, and I would just be the passenger. And that was one way I stopped getting pulled over, right? And so there was this girl who I have no idea who she was, but she was driving. Like, looking back, I don't know who she was. And so she was driving, and I had, a pouch of dope in my lap. Which was not how a secret compartment, but at that time I had a pouch of dope in my lap and scales and the whole works, man, right there in my lap. Just like I said, I didn't do for 18 years, but on year 20, I was doing that. And so, anyway, so we're driving, down the road, and it's nighttime, and the police, there's a cop car behind us, man. And it didn't turn on its lights, but it was just kind of tagging behind, following us closely. And it was all behind us for long enough to where I told her, I said, listen, that cop's about to turn on his lights, and we're going to get pulled over. And I wanted to give her a heads up that when we do, I am running, like I am going on foot. So just be prepared. And so I told her to pull over, and we were coming up to a 4-way stop, and there was a couple gas stations, and I knew that there was a creek bed. And I wanted to get to that creek bed because I knew where it led to some sewer tunnels, right? So same old thing, right? And so we pull over in the parking lot, and the second she stops the car, I jump out of the car and I start running with the black pouch of dope in my hand. There's cops that cop was behind us, following us for enough time to call a lot of backup, man. So there was cops coming from every direction by that time. And so I'm running catty corner across the intersection straight towards the creek bed. And I came across some bushes. It's dark outside. And I kind of timed my arms like where when my right arm was down with the pouch of dope, I dropped it in those bushes when I jumped over them. And so I just kept on going like and didn't miss a beat. Right. So now I don't even have any dope or scales or anything on me. And now I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, yeah, let them catch me. All it is a violation of probation. They're just going to let me right back out. Right. And so I kept running, but there was a cop that was right behind me and he said, I'm fixing to tase you. And by his voice, I could tell like, dude, he was close enough. I was going down one way or another. Might as well not get tased. Right. So I'm like, okay, I stop and I put my hands and they tackle me and all that. Right. And so they walk me, all these cops, man, take me back to the police, one of the police cars and put me in the back of the car and they go talk to her and they're talking to her. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm not going to go to prison, So I'm in the back of the police car with no dope on me. They found nothing. They're talking to the girl. And all of a sudden, man, all the cops make a line and they're standing side by side. They all get flashlights out and start marching in the direction that I ran. And so they get to the bushes and they stop at the bushes. They circle around the bushes. And the next thing I know, they're holding up all my dope. Right. And so the girl told them. Right. And so they came back to the car. And, my addict mind, I'm still thinking to myself, well, prove that was mine. Right. And so it's so crazy how ridiculous, we'll lie to ourselves and what level we can actually lie to ourselves and be convinced of our own lies. But so they come back to the car, man, and they hold the dope up. And they ask me, they open the door and they say, is this yours? And I remember saying, I just thought to myself, and I remember saying, yes. And I remember they shut the door and I laid my head on the back of the cop car seat. And I went, and it was like this sigh of relief, Eric, because I knew I was going to prison. And from that moment on, I was glad. I wasn't even concerned that I was going to prison, dude. I knew I was ready, dude. And so I had already been saved for 10 years. I just couldn't get clean, man. I could not get clean, dude. And so, but I knew that if I ever was forced to get clean and had some significant clean time, I was going to use that opportunity to get close to God, figure out who God was, and go full speed ahead. And so I did go to prison, man. I went to prison. I wasn't even trying to fight it. I just wanted to plead guilty, get my charge, get my time, and go do my time and get my life started, man. And that's what I wanted to do. I was ready to start my life. 2-year sentence. But I did on that 2-year sentence, I did 1 year of that. And then 1 year on paper. So the total time incarcerated for me was 1 year. And I immediately started eating and sleeping and getting my physical body weight back on and getting healthy physically and spiritually at the same time. So during that time, I immediately, when I got incarcerated, I started reading the Bible. I started getting healthy. I started working out. It wasn't long before God started blessing me. When I got to prison, I got a super good job. I was working in the commissary store, which it was the only way you were going to be in any AC. So I had AC for part of the day. And then by night, no air conditioning. Right. And so, but I got a good job. I got a good bunk. I was in a good pod. I was in a good unit even. All across the board, I ended up getting on a praise and worship team and getting to play guitar on the praise and worship team and sing with them. And so it was blessing after blessing after blessing. Even while locked up, I got rebaptized and while I was there, and recommitted that.
Tell me a little bit about prison. So, I've never been incarcerated. A lot of the listeners probably haven't been incarcerated. So what was it like? So we watch the movies, we see the things. So, we hear that there's a lot of gangs, that there's segregation, and there's all these, horrible things that go on there in prison. But it sounds like you had a pretty positive experience. So, tell me a little bit about your year in prison.
The segregation and the affiliations and all those kinds of things, that does go on, and it's absolutely 100% accurate. And there's fighting and there's risks every day. And it is 100% that way. It greatly is dependent upon the severity is dependent upon which unit you're in, though. There are definitely 100% units that are more relaxed with the offenders, if you will, are, less apt to or less likely to be in fights and less likely to kill you and those kinds of things. And so, from the get-go, I was definitely in a better safer environment when, if there's a such thing in prison. At the transfer unit, there was a gentleman that had gotten stabbed, and he was trying to make his way to the medical unit and died at the door of the medical unit, and I mean, there was just fights all the time, man. And so there was all that kind of stuff going on. Even in the unit that I was in, there was fights, at least on a weekly basis. And so, that does go on. And so the fact that I never was in a fight, that alone is grace of God, and God just orchestrating and protecting for sure. Because it's kind of hard to do, man. It's kind of hard to go through any amount of time in prison without getting in a fight, jail too. I don't know if it was a God thing. I'm assuming it was, but no one ever even came to me and tried to, it was segregated for sure, man. I mean, these people hang out with these people hanging out with these people, and they were doing the deal, and they were acting accordingly, right? But no one ever even came to me and said, hey, you need to be with us, or you need to be with, them. And so, it was, I was untouched in that area, man. And so I had to do with the way I carried myself. And I think it had to do with a lot of God, man. And so people just had a respect for that, man. And I got along with everybody, from the get go. I hung out with everyone, man. And it was seen and visible, and I didn't hide that. And I was, confident about that. And so I never ran into the issue, man. So, my goal after coming out of 20-year meth addiction was stay clean, right? That's all I had on my mind in prison is I need to do everything I can to stay clean. So I'm going to get close to God, and with God's help, I'm going to stay clean, right? From meth. That's my deal. And I thought, because I was a 20-year meth addict, that meth was the only thing that was my problem, bro. Like, meth is the reason I couldn't keep a job. Meth is the reason I was strung out. Meth is the reason that I went to prison. Meth is the reason I lost my family. Meth is the reason I was homeless. Meth is my problem, right? It's my one and only problem. And that's kind of the way that I understood still at the time, because I'm so fresh into being clean, right? And so go through prison, I'm leading Bible studies and all that, and I know how to get close to God, and I did develop a relationship with him, and I learned how to hear from him and learned how to hear how he speaks to me through people and through other things. And so when I got out, I got a job. I ended up in a halfway house. So I came out into a Christian, I made sure I came out into a Christian-based halfway house. And so when I got out, I got a job. My goal was get a job, get a full-time job, get my license back, get divorced from my ex-wife. So when I got out of prison, I was still married to my ex-wife, who I was in addiction with. I still had the last name Loser, Loser. Still didn't have a vehicle, didn't have a valid driver's license, had $12,000 or so worth of surcharges from tickets that had to be taken care of before I could get a valid license. Through my time at that halfway house, I very quickly, an amazing woman named Rachel Yancey, she helped me. She's a part of that. Her and her husband started the whole halfway house. And so she became a part of that. And she really poured into me and helped me get like the $12,000 worth of surcharges reduced to pretty much like $250 or something, like an obtainable amount. And so I did that and got everything paid off. I got a license, got Social Security card for the first time. Got a divorce, became legal for the first time in however many years, right? She helped me get a job. I was driving a forklift, making pretty much minimum wage, and I was happy about it. It was more than I was making in prison. And so I was happy about it, and I was making a few $100 a week, and I thought to myself, this is great. This is good. And so I thought that was I didn't have any higher expectations, Eric, to be honest with you. And so what happened was, a few months out, I ended up going on a dating website, a Christian dating site, and I ended up meeting my current wife, right? And so I met her, and we started talking just online, and it started kind of developing, right? And I could see that, this might be going somewhere, and I didn't plan on getting out and immediately, meeting someone and going down that road. I had so much other important work to do, on myself, but that is what happened. And so, we started going down this road. When I realized it was potentially going to be serious, I wanted to basically give her a heads up. This is who I am. This is where I came from. Like, let me tell you what you're getting into type thing. And so I sent her this long message, man. And I basically, at the time, I had to say, I told her the truth. I said, and at that time, I was still just getting close, but I wasn't there yet. I said, listen, I need you to know I just got out of prison. I live in a halfway house. And so it was all these things. And as a meth addict for 20 years, you get so used to telling people something and they don't even believe you, dude, because you tell them and it never happens, right? Like, yeah, my intentions are good, but and so I was so used to that being received that way, But she did believe me, and she went through a lot of prayer, and she, asked God, and went through her process of asking God, was this something that was okay? And so she ended up being okay with those things, man. And she felt led to continue and pursue this relationship. And so we start going down this road, we get together, and I'm working, and one day, man, and things go quickly, man. Within a couple months, we get engaged, right? I ask her, hey, will you marry me? And we start talking about marriage. And so we get engaged. And then within a week or two after that, I felt like I felt like I was hearing from God that I was supposed to start a lawn service, quit my job and start a lawn service. And this was in February of 2016. And so no grass was even growing really, And but I called her up and I was like, hey, her name's Christina. And I said, hey, Christina, I feel like I'm supposed to quit my job, right? A couple weeks after we get engaged and, start a lawn business. And her response was, have you prayed about that? And so I'm like, okay, all right. So I said, let me call you right back. Right. And so I hang up the phone and I go into a little corner of the warehouse where I'm driving the forklift or whatever, and I go in the corner and I start to pray, man. I start to ask God. And I remember not even getting the sentence out, God, and it was like a firm yes. And so, I went to my boss and I told him that I was resigning. I resigned. I walked out the door, got in my truck, and on my way home, I found a weed eater on the side of the road, like somebody was throwing away, a gas-powered weed eater with a blower attachment that worked. And so I picked that up. So now I've got like 2 out of the 3 main ingredients I need to start a lawn business, right? And so I get home a couple days later. A friend of mine, a friend of the family, called me up and said, hey, I heard you're starting a lawn business. Here's a mower for free, and gave me this push mower. And so now I've got this push mower and a weed eater and an attachment. This was residential equipment, and it was all used. And so it was something, but it was still residential equipment. But so what would happen? So I started a lawn business, dude. And so what I started doing was, she was still doing her thing. And what I would do is I moved back in. My parents let me move out of the halfway house and I moved in with my parents and I started this lawn business. And so I had my mower and my weed eater and my blower attachment stored in the garage. And every morning I'd get up and I just started right there in my parents' neighborhood. And I started going up and down every street and stopping at every yard and knocking on every door. And anyone who would answer, I would talk to. And anyone who didn't answer, I left a handwritten note that said, I'll mow your yard for $20, right? And so that's how the whole thing started. And so, the first few weeks were rough. My wife would call halfway through the day and she'd be like, how's it going? And I'd be like, well, I've got, 22 no's, one maybe, and one that I'm supposed to be doing next week, or something like that. And so I would dread the calls. And meanwhile, I'm using all my gas. I'm using all the money that I do. Right. And so, anyway, but what happened was I started getting some lawns and it started building up. And so within a few weeks, I was making pretty decent money. Within a couple months, I was making more than I was ever, man, at my job that I had just quit. At the end of the first year, had made more than I ever had in my life. And then from that point on, by the end of the second year, my wife was able to resign from her corporate job and come into the business full time on her birthday. And then from there, our revenue doubled every year for like the next 5 years. And it just kept going and going and going. And so, and God really, really opened up doors and blessed us with this business. And so we went from, we started out this rink-a-dink, one-man band, residential, going door to door. And then by year 3, we dropped all the residents. We had well over 100 yards at that time, dropped all those, started getting into like the smaller scale commercial stuff and then the larger scale commercial stuff. And then, God just kept opening up these amazing doors and giving us these amazing connections. And so I put the same effort into doing something legitimate that I put into staying high for 20 years. And God opened the doors. I walked through them. He gives us everything we have. We just do our part to keep it, right? Like God does all the work for us. We just have to partner with him. And so now, almost 10 years later, that is what we do. That we have a successful commercial, large scale commercial landscape business, that supports everything. And so, and now we've got crews and we've got, a shop and all the, all this stuff. And so now we own this successful business. So I got out of prison, I got married, started a business and got pregnant all in 1 year. And so, I was off to the race. I mean, dude, I took off running, dude. And so, anyway, man, so there was a lot going on. And it was great, except, one thing that happened was, I mentioned earlier, I said, I thought my only problem was meth, right? Like I thought I'm a meth addict for 20 years. That's what ruined my life. If I can just fix the meth, I'm good. Right. And that's what I did believe until I got married. And once I got married, all of my issues and my problems and the other things that were wrong with me started to come out real quick, man. I had anger issues. I had pride issues. I had insecurity issues. I had lust issues. I had ended up again with porn issues, even after being saved, after getting out of prison, ended up back addicted to porn. It came, and I always thought also, oh, I'll never have a problem with porn once I get married because I'll be married, right? So, no problem because I'll have my wife to have sex with me, right? Like, I mean, and yeah, that's how it is. And so, but no. And so I started, all this stuff came out, man. And I started realizing, number one, the other thing that happened over the 20 years of meth use was my mind and my thought patterns were all jacked up, man. I had wrong thought patterns, wrong belief systems, I developed my mentally way down the wrong path, man. And so, and then came out insecure and just not knowing how to interact in normal society on life's normal terms in actual reality. I had problems talking to people one-on-one, normal people, right? I didn't know how to interact with groups of people. I was nervous. I was anxious. I was, dude, I was a mess. And so, now we're pregnant. Now I'm married. Now I'm pregnant. We're in. And I'm, it was, dude, God has had to renew my mind and work on a transformation in me for the first 6 years of my marriage, man. My wife and I fought. We almost got divorced. I mean, dude, it was not, I don't want people to think that, I got out of prison. I got saved and then I went to prison and then I cleaned up my life and I stopped doing meth and everything was great, dude. Because just because I wasn't a drug addict anymore doesn't mean I was fixed, dude. There were consequences. There were reactions to the actions. I mean, there was, we reap what we sow, and there were long lasting effects that I had to deal with and get through even after getting clean. And so, man, I feel like that was a lot.
It was a lot. It is a lot. So, so give me some, you guys have been married for 10 years then? So
no, so I've been clean for almost 10 years because
Right.
1 year in prison, 1 year in parole, and then dude, we're in like somewhere in the 8th year of being married.
Okay. So you've been married about 8 years then.
Yeah, man.
So tell me a little bit about that change, because you mentioned coming in, we bring baggage into our marriages.
Yep.
And a lot of it's from our past or different things that have happened. So you're now married to this wonderful woman, and you've got all this baggage, and you start discovering that, it's not just meth. It's all these other things that are issues too. How did you work through that? I mean, did you get involved? Were you involved in a church? Did you guys go to church on a regular basis? I mean, now you got a kid involved. I mean, is religion and faith a part of your life now? I mean, tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, 100%. Religion and faith is definitely, I'll just say faith is definitely a huge part of this journey, and the only reason that I'm where I am right now, and that we as a married couple also are where we are right now, is 100% because of God, man. So when I got out, I immediately did get into church, man. I got into church, and when I met her, we started going to the same church, and we've been plugged in there for this entire time. And so we also, got involved. We're active, we're in leadership. We, teach, we do all these things, right? And volunteer, and, all of that. And so and have a relationship with God and all of that. But in the meantime, I was still struggling and still in bondage in so many different ways, man. And so, what I'll say about that is, you say, what did you do along the way? Or, how did that go for you? So much of it was mental and heart issues. And so, man, I had to unravel the way that I saw and understood life to be, and understood what was right and wrong. And, but it was a 6-year struggle, man. I was difficult. I was impossible, dude. I was impossible to live with. Yeah.
Did you go to any counseling at all? I mean, did you guys have counseling? I mean, usually people have a hard time figuring that out on their own.
it did take some counseling, but the counseling doesn't happen or work. It doesn't happen if you're not willing to surrender and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe something is wrong with me, right? So I had to come to the heart conclusion that, and accept that, wait a minute, she might be right about this. I might not, there might be something wrong with me. The way I'm looking at this might be wrong. I don't have it figured out. Let me go get some help and let me get a third party to a Christian, solid brother, third party counselor and let me go there and try to get some advice and a different outlook on this. And so I made the decision in my heart to go get that help and do it with a open mind and a willingness to be wrong. And I was wrong, man. I was wrong in so many ways. And so, yeah, no, it took a couple years, man, and it was solid. But the only reason it works and the only way counseling is going to work or a marriage is going to work if you're truly willing to lay it down and accept. And it has to be more important. The success of the marriage and has to be more important than you being right.
Yeah. So I love what you said earlier about being willing. Willingness is the key that unlocks the door to recovery, whatever that recovery may be. Recovery in your marriage, recovery from porn, recovery from drugs. If you're not willing, the door is shut. And if you're willing to, submit to a process of change, then God can do everything with that. But if you're not willing, then the door is shut, and you can't do anything. So anyway, I love that you were willing to change. And it sounds like you guys have a great marriage. Do you only have the one kid, or do you have more than one kid now?
Yeah. So we do have two kids now. So we have two boys, amazing sons, man. They're so great, man. It's so amazing to be a dad. They are. So my oldest son is about to be 8, and my youngest son is about to be 4. So two boys, and dude, they're a blast. And yes, and before I go too far on that, don't give up. If you're in a marriage and you're struggling and your relationship's struggling, don't give up too quick, man. Look, man, we've been married 8 years, and it took 6 years for me to really start to get it and get my heart right and to get in the game and start making changes in our marriage now. Christina and I, we look back, and when we talk to people about this, we look back and we're so thankful and grateful that we didn't give up when it got really, really hard, because looking back, we would have missed out and we would never have what we have now. And we're so thankful for what we have now. So don't give up. And if you're a meth addict, or a drug addict of any kind, or someone, listen, don't give up on them, because I was a meth addict for 20 years. And so I don't even call myself an addict. I have addicted tendencies, and I know that I can't do this, that, or the other because I have those tendencies, but I don't even call myself an addict, man. So I'm a child of God. I am a new creation, and I'm living a life of freedom. And so my wife and I, we get to go now. So once it's so fun because God has a plan for all of our lives, man. And his timing is perfect. He knows he has everything lined out for you. Like, he has an entire plan for you lined out, and it's a plan to prosper you, not to harm you, to use you in the kingdom of God. And it's not going to start until you get yourself right, though, man. You have got to, and when I say get yourself, I don't mean do it yourself, because you're going to need some help. You need God, you need help, you need a community. But once your heart's right, God's going to start opening up doors for you. So, we got our marriage together, and we went through the process, and and there's no meth now, and we're living free in freedom. And God just started opening doors. And my wife and I are getting to go back into prisons now. I'm getting to speak to these guys, before they get back out. And just pour life into them and give hope that otherwise they might not have. And so we're doing that. We've got so much going on, man, that God is doing now after the fact. And so, we're talking now, I've got 10 years clean, been out for, I think it's like 8 years, and been married. And it's just, dude, God is so good and has blessed me so tremendously that it brings me to my knees in humility. I'm just humbled and excited about what God is doing in my life.
Amen, brother. What's your message to the listeners?
Number one, God loves you. God loves you. He is not willing that any should perish. He wants all to be saved. And so he loves you. You're not forgotten. He hears you. He hears your prayers. He hears your cries. He knows every hair on your head. His thoughts for you are like the sands on the seashore, and he loves you. He right now even through me right now, you can probably feel, you know who you are. Like you hear God tugging at your heart. Like God is trying to tell you it's okay. He has your back. And it is possible. If God can do this for me, he can do it for anybody. Number one, it's possible and there is hope. But don't be the person that can't be helped. Don't be the guy that can't be helped. Don't be the woman that can't be helped. And if you're the person that, and if you're not the one that needs the help, but you're the one that's trying to help somebody, don't give up. Don't give up on your son. Don't give up on your daughter. Their heart's still there. They love you. God loves them. It's not too late. Keep praying. God answers prayer. God is a God of restoration.
Cory, thanks so much for sharing the rest of your amazing story with us. If you are interested in reading all of Cory's story, or you would like to gift someone his story, you can order his book, Born a Loser, on Amazon by searching Born a Loser by Cory Lozier. Also, if you would like to donate to Cory's prison ministry, you can email him at ditchtodestiny@gmail.com. That's ditch, D-I-T-C-H, to Destiny, D-E-S-T-I-N-Y @gmail.com. Hey, if you are listening today and maybe you feel like your identity is based on all the bad choices that you've made in the past, maybe you think that you have no other choice than to be a loser. That's a lie. Change is possible, and Jesus Christ can change your life just like he did for Cory. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you liked this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.